Hey everyone, welcome to the video. This is going to be my first look lineup for week 1 of the NFL playoffs, wild card weekend. I'm sure you guys are excited. I am as well. We got 4 good games on tap, and I am looking forward to breaking this down. Now, I do realize there might be a lot of new people watching this video because, the NFL, just regular season-long fantasy football leagues are over. So if people are bored, they might be shifting to DFS for the playoffs. And if you are, hey, what's up? And just for the purpose of this video, it's not me just building my lineup and this is what I'm rolling with. The pricing just came out on this slate, so what I do is I'd make a first look lineup video. It's where I just do my first initial reactions to the slate, the salaries, the matchups, guys in good spots, guys in bad spots. Then we make a lineup and see what fits. And then like on Wednesday, I'll make my core plays video after I've had enough time to do a bunch of research and just break down all the plays. And then on Thursday or Friday, I'll do my lineup building video, which is just an example lineup I would, just going through a cash game process of how I would build a lineup. So again, this video is not that formal, just me going through my first initial reactions, so it's more of a relaxed video. But before we continue, if you guys could, just as always, leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. Really helps me out, really appreciate it. You can also follow me on Twitter at ChrisPennell16. And if you're interested in the spreadsheets, I build every single week for the NFL season, so there's just going to be a month left. I do projections on there. It's got all the stats you would need on there. I do my cash game rankings, my cheat sheet, my Discord chat, so you can bug me on there if you want. And I also do NBA content as well every single night. Links to the description below for my Patreon. And you also might see my shirt get all fuzzy because for some reason the green screen's messing with a blue shirt. It makes no sense, not even close to being the same color. But if you see my shirt turn black or something, that's just because the green screen's being weird. Alright, so without further ado, let's get into this slate. Let me just make sure the names are popping up. Okay, so there. So we'll start off with Russell Wilson at 6,800. And yeah, I do think he's probably the best play from just a projection standpoint at the quarterback position. And this actually is one of the best games on the slate. We have a 46-point over-under, 1.5 spread in Seattle's favor. And Seattle's actually on the road here in Philly. Now, I would prefer if Seattle was at home because we know they typically play their best football at home in front of the 12th man. So them being on the road is a little bit of a concern. Now, Seattle's the much better team. The only reason that Seattle's on the road here is because Philly is the NFC East champions and that division is just straight garbage. But that's just how the NFL playoff seeding works, so nothing I can do about it. But Russell Wilson, it's a good matchup through the air. Philly actually has one of the best run defenses in the NFL, so I do think they're going to have to pass the ball on them. So it makes sense to play Russell Wilson with some of the pass catchers. This should be a pretty back and forth game, pretty high over-under, just given all the other over-unders on this slate. So I do think Russ is a fine way to go, although I will say he did not make the first look lineup on this video, but I still think he's a fantastic option. Drew BREES, again, he's one of the better quarterback plays on the slate, going up against Minnesota at home in the Superdome. The Saints, I don't know what it is. They cheat at home, something like that. They are just unstoppable at home in the Superdome, especially in the playoffs. That stadium's going to be absolutely rocking. I shouldn't say they absolutely smash the Vikings, but I think they win by double-digit points here. They're actually 8-point favorites, and it's a 48-point over-under, which is the highest on the slate. And them being 8-point favorites, they have by far the highest implied team total. So you got to like Drew BREES and company here. I think Drew BREES is a fine play. ALVIN, KAMARA, Michael Thomas, and all their friends, all good plays. 6,600, it's a good matchup through the air versus Minnesota. They don't have the best pass defense in the world. They have a pretty good run defense, but through the air, shouldn't really offer too much of resistance for Drew BREES. But again, he did not make this first look lineup. I do think he's one of the top options on this slate. And trust me, I'm not going to say everyone's a top option here, but Josh Allen, he's also pretty good in a pretty good spot here versus versus Houston on the road. So he's 6,500. He's pretty pricey, but he's one of the best options he's just one of the best fantasy quarterbacks in the league because it does offer us rushing upside every single week. And it never surprises you if he gets into the end zone just by running the ball. He doesn't have to have big passing games to have good fantasy outings. Like versus New England, he only had 200 passing yards, but he also had 7 carries for 43 yards, so that got him up to 20 fantasy points. Versus Pittsburgh, he only had 139 passing yards, 7 for 28 on the ground to get into the end zone, 17 fantasy points, saved his day a little bit. He did have a really rough game versus Baltimore, I will say that, but 23, 20, 33, 25, 17, 18, 21. He's one of the more consistent fantasy quarterbacks in the league. Is he the best quarterback in the world? No, but you don't have to be that good in real life to be good for fantasy purposes, and that's what Josh Allen is. He's much better for fantasy than real life, because he does have some accuracy problems, but this is a really good matchup versus Houston, so that's why I do have interest here, and the rushing upside does get me there. I'd say he's my QB1 just because he's a little bit cheaper than Russell Wilson, and the matchup's pristine here versus Houston. They have one of the worst pass defenses in the NFL. They're actually giving up the second most points per game to quarterbacks, allowing 23.2 points per game to the position. So I think Josh Allen, I think he's my favorite spend up quarterback of the slate, and you save a little bit of salary, and he also gives you that rushing upside floor. So Josh Allen, I think he's a fantastic play. Did not make this lineup, though, I will say that. Deshaun Watson, I'm personally going to pass on Deshaun Watson. He's been pretty hit or miss this season. He does play his best football at home, I will say that. But versus Buffalo, I would rather use the run game versus Buffalo. Buffalo has one of the best pass defenses in the NFL. I believe they're only allowing, I can check, the third fewest points allowed per game to quarterbacks, only 13.8 points per game. They have a very good pass defense, so I'm just looking to pass on Deshaun Watson here. Will Fuller's banged up as well, and when Will Fuller's just banged up, it really hurts the offense because he can stretch the field, and it also hurts DeAndre Hopkins a little bit, not from a volume standpoint, but just from opening up some more breathing room for him. Not like it matters. He's arguably top 2, top 3 wide receiver in the NFL, so. But Deshaun Watson at this price tag, I would much rather just find the extra $100 to pay for Josh Allen as of right now. So I'm going to pass on Deshaun Watson. Does he have a high ceiling, and has he performed well in bad matchups before? Yes, but I just think there's better options on this slate at similar price tags. Ryan Tannehill, I've been a big Ryan Tannehill fan. I actually jumped on the train after his first start. I said I want to keep playing this guy because he was just way too cheap. Unfortunately, the price tag has caught up to him recently, where he was $6,500, $6,600, $6,800. But the guy's been pretty darn good, and he's not just thinking of dunking the ball. He actually has the highest yards per attempt this season. He's going down the field, and the emergence of A.J. Brown has obviously helped that case. I mean, I think A.J. Brown's going to be an absolute stud. I think, if they keep Ryan Tannehill around, and they keep Derrick Henry around, and they keep, obviously, A.J. Brown's going to be around, I think it's a really good core 3 they can run with, and I think Tennessee can be pretty solid for, years. So if they can keep that core, I'm going to be pretty excited to watch Titans games. But Ryan Tannehill, the guy's been absolutely awesome. I believe he's like QB3 since week 7. The guy's been an absolute stud, only behind Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. Now, the matchup, though, that's the problem. So my shirt's like black now. I don't understand why it's doing this. It's a blue shirt. It's a green screen. No, I don't understand. But just ignore it, I guess. Maybe it'll go away. But matchup versus New England, it just downright sucks. They are allowing the fewest points per game to quarterbacks, only 12.8 points per game. And I know Ryan Tannehill has been very good, but I also know that New England sucked last week. They lost versus Miami, and it was a must-win game for them to get that first-round bye. It did not end up happening, and Ryan Fitzpatrick actually had a pretty solid game. But the playoff Patriots, they're playing at home. I think Ryan Tannehill is going to be in for a tough game here. Is he capable of throwing 250 and 2 touchdowns? Yes, I think there's better options on this slate. I don't want to go down dying with Ryan Tannehill versus New England. No disrespect to Ryan Tannehill, big fan, but I just don't think this is the matchup to target Ryan Tannehill. The worst matchup you can ask for a quarterback. And this game also only features a 43.5 point over-under, and the Titans are 4.5 point underdogs. So just think there's better ways to go. Carson Wentz, he is playing with a bunch of guys you'd pick up at the YMCA for just pickup ball at this point. I mean, he's got Greg Ward out there. He's got Joshua Perkins. Wasn't Greg Ward a quarterback at one point in college? Then he's got Dallas Goedert, who's good. Zach Ertz, he's questionable up in the air. He's dealing with a lacerated kidney and some fractured, broken ribs. So it's going to be tough for him to play. But Carson Wentz, he's been getting the job done recently. 17, 21, 22, 23, 28. He's been very good the past, 4 or 5 weeks. A little bit of a rough game versus Giants, but that's just because Boston Scott was stealing all the touchdowns. I actually had a Carson Wentz, Greg Ward, Dallas Goedert stack, and every time they got near the end zone, it was Boston Scott. It was the most infuriating thing ever. But Wentz, he's a fine option versus Seattle. This is one of the top, if not the top game for fantasy purposes, because we have a 1.5 point spread, 46 point over under. I would say the Saints game is the best for fantasy, but that's also an 8 point spread, so I kind of like the closer spread games. But Philly, it's a good matchup for Carson Wentz. Seattle's I shouldn't say they're one of the worst pass defenses in the NFL, but they're bottom half, so I think Carson Wentz could have a good game here. But it just sucks that all of his passing options are hurt. But if he gets Zach Ertz back, that's going to definitely be a bump. I wouldn't say he's my favorite play on this slate just because, just give me Josh Allen over Carson Wentz. It's only a 300 difference, and I think you could find a 300 salary remaining just to get there. Kirk Cousins, I'm going to pass on Kirk Cousins. I just think the Saints win this game. And plus, I know it doesn't matter if the Saints win this game for fantasy purposes, but I just think the Saints come out and ball out. I actually have a lot of interest in the Saints defense, as you'll see. And Kirk Cousins, he's not been that great for fantasy purposes lately. 7 points, 12, 13, 18, Had a good game versus Denver with 26, 19, 21's pretty good, 11. Then he was on that hot stretch of 32, 31, 23. But most of the time this season, he's been pretty lackluster for fantasy purposes, and Adam Thielen's a little bit hobbled, so it's obviously going to hurt his production as well. And Dalvin Cook's expected to come back for this game, so I assume they're going to want to try to run the ball, which it's a bad matchup to run the ball. It's actually much easier to throw the ball in the Saints. The 6,100, I don't hate it, and I do expect them to be playing catch-up here. But I just don't trust Kirk Cousins to have a big ceiling game here. And I actually think there's a cheaper option that I have a little bit more interest in. So I'm going to pass on Kirk Cousins as of right now. It's a solid matchup through the air versus New Orleans. But I could just see the Saints coming out and just taking over this game. So I have some concern with Kirk Cousins for sure. But Tom Brady, he's actually the cheapest starting quarterback on the slate at 5,800. I think I'm just going to plug him in and take the salary savings. Is he a great fantasy quarterback? Not at all, but I think he can give us similar production to Kirk Cousins. He's also 300 cheaper, and this is a pretty good matchup through the air versus Tennessee. They are 20th DVOA versus the pass compared to 6th DVOA versus the run, so I think they can have some success throwing the ball here. And he's cheap. If he can get me 2 touchdowns and 250 yards, I will take it. Now again, his game log, it looks pretty ugly. 15 points versus Miami. He should have had a good game there. He did not. 17, 12, 11. I understand. He's not been that great. 28 points versus Houston was nice. 11, 8, 14, 18, 12, 26, 27, 4. 20. I'm not going to go through the whole game log. Most of the time, he's pretty lackluster, but he's the cheapest quarterback on this slate. New England at home, it's a different kind of animal. I think Tom Brady can throw us a couple of touchdowns, and I think he will get the job done. Now, if another quarterback on this slate ends up getting like 30 points, yeah, we're going to be looking a little bit rough with Tom Brady because I don't think he's got that kind of upside at this point of his career. But if you can't get up to Josh Allen or Russell Wilson or Drew Brees, I think just punting it with Tom Brady at the cheapest price point on the slate for a starting quarterback is not a bad way to go. And Tennessee's actually bottom half in points allowed to the quarterback position. So, if Tom Brady can get us 19, 20 points, I think we'll be fine at 5,800. So we're gonna plug in Tom Brady as of right now. Again, I don't love it, but this is just a first look lineup. It does not mean too much. Don't look too much into it. Trust me, I'd rather get in Josh Allen or Drew Brees or Russell Wilson, but as of right now, this is just what we're going to roll with. So now we'll move on to the running back position. Derrick Henry, yeah, he's obviously the best. I shouldn't say he's the best running back on this slate because we got Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara. It's actually it's a top-heavy slate for the running backs. Is Henry's a beast, Dalvin Cook's a beast, Alvin Kamara's a beast. I think all three are good options. But Derrick Henry, man, he has been an absolute stud. He's coming off a monster game versus Houston. 32 carries, 211 yards, 3 touchdowns, 42 fantasy points. The guy's been a rock star this season. Now, the problem is versus New England is that they are allowing the fewest points per game to the running back position. And they are also, I believe, 7th DVOA versus run, if I remember correctly. I'm trying to pull up the points given up on my phone. 1 second. Yeah, they're only giving up 16.2 points per game to running backs. That is the best in the league. So this is a bad matchup for Derrick Henry. Another problem here is that the Patriots are 4.5-point favorites. So if Tennessee does fall behind here, Derrick Henry is really not someone we can count on in the passing game. We might actually see more Deion Lewis than we'd want to. So I do have concerns paying $8,200 for Derrick Henry. So I think personally I'm going to pass. Is he a beast? Yes. But I just have concerns here. If the Patriots pull out a lead, maybe the Titans aren't ready for the spotlight, especially on the road in New England. 8 o'clock game. It's gonna be, it's gonna be loud in New England. I can see the Titans coming out and struggling a little bit. And I know the Patriots team has not looked that good, but when the Patriots just get into the playoffs, I don't know, they turn on a different switch. So I'm gonna have to pass on Derrick Henry as of right now. Dalvin Cook, he's questionable, but he is expected to be back. Now, the problem is he's going up against one of the best run defenses in the NFL. Saints are only allowing 20.3 points per game to the running back position, which is 6th fewest in the NFL. Or I believe 1, 2, 3. Yeah, 6th fewest in the NFL. So this is going to be a tough matchup to establish the run. And really, Dalvin Cook, he's been scoring touchdowns the past few games, but other than that, he's been pretty disappointing in the yardage department. If you look versus Detroit, 18 carries, 62 yards. Versus Seattle, 9 carries, 29 yards. Versus Denver, 11 carries, 26 yards. They get into the end zone, though. And then he had the good game versus Dallas, where he had 26 carries for 97 yards. So really, the yardage totals has not been that great recently. So I do have a little bit of concern right there. Now, he is involved in the passing game, so it does give him a safer floor. And he's been a touchdown magnet pretty much. But he's very talented. He's going to be a top 5 pick in fantasy drafts next year. But, this is a tough matchup versus New Orleans. I could see them falling behind, throwing the ball quite a bit. And I think New Orleans sells out to stop Dalvin Cook and makes Kirk Cousins beat him through the air. So I think I'm going to have to pass on Dalvin Cook. I don't think this game sets up too well for him, although he's involved in the passing game, so it's not like he's just, he can get game scripted out, but I just don't think we're going to have a big Dalvin Cook game personally. Now, if I had to spend up for a running back, it's going to be ALVIN Kamara for me at 7,400, just because the Saints have the highest implied team total on the slate. They're 8-point favorites at home versus Minnesota. Now, the matchup sucks. They have a very, very good run defense. They're top 5 DVA versus the run, not allowing too many points per game to the running back position. But ALVIN Kamara, he is in good form. He looked great in that last game versus Carolina. The only problem was he had 10 touches. I only think he had 1 touch in the second half, which sucked because he was a core play for me, and he was smashing in the first half, and I thought he was going to have a big game. Saints got out to a huge lead, so they really didn't need to use ALVIN Kamara. But I just want exposure to the Saints here, and at 7,400, I think that's a pretty good price for ALVIN Kamara. So I think he's my RB1 in the slate. He's going to catch passes, so I think he's one of the safest options, and he's also in the best game environment or game setup for a running back of the high dollar running back. So ALVIN Kamara would be my favorite running back on the slate. Unfortunately, I could not afford him here because I like his teammate a little bit better. Would I suggest trying to get ALVIN Kamara and Michael Thomas in your lineups? Yes, but as of right now, I've not found a way to do that, but we'll see later on in the week. But love ALVIN Kamara. He's my favorite running back. Miles Sanders questionable. He left that game early versus New York. Boston Scott just took over and smashed the world. Now, we don't know if he's going to end up playing or not, so I really can't give you too much information. Now, he did try to play through the injury, but ended up having to leave the game. I can't go too far in depth on this. It's only Monday, so I don't know if he's going to play, so I'll just leave it at that. If he does play, he's been great the past 2 games. 20 carries versus Dallas, 26 points. 19 carries versus Washington, 38 points. Involved through the air as well. 6 targets, 5. So I think he'd be a solid play if you want exposure to that game. But again, I have no idea if he's going to be healthy. But someone that's actually going to make our lineup here, it's Devin Singletary at 6K. And I think this is one of my favorite spots for a running back on the slate. Now, the Houston Texans, they suck through the air, but they also suck on the ground as well. They're getting rain on, and we just saw Derrick Henry have a huge game versus them. Do I think Devin Singletary is going to do that versus them? No. But I will say I think he's a very solid play. So I think this game is going to be pretty ugly for fantasy purposes. I don't see a lot of high-scoring fantasy plays on this slate, but I think Devin Singletary is a solid play. So we have a low 41.5 point over/under. 3-point favorites, or the Texans are 3-point favorites, so I really don't think this game gets out of hand. But Devin Singletary, he should have a good game here. The Texans are giving up 28.3 points per game to the running back position. That is 7th most in the NFL. And I think this game, it's going to go by quick. It's the first game of it's first game on Saturday. So I think it's going to be a little bit of a lackluster game. I think both teams are going to try to run the ball quite a bit because you can run on both teams. I think Devin Singletary is going to get you 20 plus touches here. At least flirt with 20. He's going to be involved through the passing game a little bit. He did have 8 targets versus Baltimore. I think he's a safe bet for double-digit points. I think he gets you into the end zone. I think Devin Singletary is a pretty good play versus Houston. So we're going to plug him in. He's at a fair price point. I can't fit ALVIN Kamara in, so I think the next best option would be Devin Singletary. So, scoring on the list here, Boston Scott, he smashed in the last game. If Miles Sanders happens to be out, you could look his way. He had 19 carries for 54 yards. That's not great, only 2.8 yards per carry. But he also had 3 touchdowns, and he also had 6 targets, 4 catches, 84 yards, 35 fantasy points. And he's actually had 3 good games in the past 4 games. 35 points, 13, 24. Oddly, he's been good. Jordan Howard's been hurt. Jordan Howard is expected to have a role in this game, so that would run into Boston Scott's usage. But not a favorite play of mine. I just wanted to address how good he was in the last game. You could look James White's way. He's going to be involved in the passing game. We all know that. He barely gets any work on the ground. 2 carries, 3, 6. Targets are there pretty much every single week, which gives him a nice floor. And he's had double-digit points in, I think, all but 3 games. So he's been very consistent. Really haven't seen a ceiling game out of him besides that Houston game where he had 37 fantasy points. Other than that, he's pretty much been getting you 12 to 15 points. So if you want 12 to 15 points, I think James White's a fine option. It's actually pretty tough to run on Tennessee as well, so you could look his way if you think Sony Michel might struggle. Travis Homer, he had a solid game. I just not really in love with that, especially versus Philly. He was involved in the passing game. But Carlos Hyde, I like Carlos Hyde here. He comes in 5,100. We are going to plug him in just because you can run on Buffalo. I was just looking at something. So I don't love playing both running backs on the same in the same game because it's not the best correlation play, but just the way this lineup fit. We're going to plug in Carlos Hyde because he's going up against Buffalo, and Buffalo has one of the best pass defenses in the NFL, but you can also run on Buffalo. So I think the Texans are going to look to try to establish the run here. And surprisingly, Carlos Hyde is a 1,000-yard rusher this season. I don't know if you guys knew that, but it kind of threw me off for a second. If you just look at the glance thing, he had 1,070 rushing yards this season, averaged 4.5 yards per carry, 245 rushing attempts, 6 rushing touchdowns. The guy's been getting used, and they're not afraid to give him 20-plus carries. We've seen it a couple times this season. He had 26 carries versus Tennessee, over 100 yards, and 26 carries versus KC, 21 carries versus Atlanta, 20 carries versus Jacksonville. They're not afraid to give him the rock. Is he the most exciting play in the world? Not really. I mean, he's pretty touchdown dependent, but I do think he can fall into the end zone here. He's going to be the guy on the goal line, so don't hate playing Carlos Hyde. I think he's a good option at 5,100. I think he can get the job done. Not expecting much, but just give me 10 points and I'll move on. So we're going to plug in Carlos Hyde. And then we're going to move on to the wide receiver position because I want to talk about every single running back because I'm just going to bore you guys to death. But I will say SONY Michel I think is a fine play just because last year, what did the Patriots do in the playoffs? They looked to establish the run. And SONY Michel, they pretty much rode SONY Michel to a Super Bowl. And past 3 weeks, I think they're getting them ready. I think they might have been saving them for the playoffs a little bit. He had 19 carries versus Cincy, 21 carries versus Buffalo, 18 carries versus Miami. I think he gets like 20 carries again. He was also battling an illness versus Miami, so it might not have been his best performance, but he still got into the end zone finally, which was nice. But SONY Michel, I don't mind him here at 4,600 if you think the Patriots play with the lead. Look to establish the run. I don't hate SONY Michel. I actually think he's a fine option. But let's just scroll down the list. Not scroll down the list. Actually, let's get out of here. I'm tired of talking about running backs. Easiest play in the slate, in my opinion. You play Michael Thomas and you move on. Michael Thomas is a just cheat code at home, and I would not recommend fading him. He is my lock of the week. I will tell you that right now. I don't see a scenario where you would want to fade Michael Thomas. And I know he's expensive. He's the most expensive guy in the slate, but it's deserved, and I honestly think you're going to have a rough time if you don't play Michael Thomas. Last game, look, starters got pulled early. They really didn't have a need to use Michael Thomas much. I'm going to look past that. Besides that, the guy's been an absolute stud this year. There's nothing absolutely not to like whatsoever. He had... Sorry, my camera got out of focus. I'm going to pause this and try to fix it. 1 second. Alright, I think it's fixed. Yeah, it's fixed. Okay, so Michael Thomas, he's been an absolute stud this year. He's leading pretty much every category you can think of. Receiving yards. He had the lead in market share, target share, not market share of air yards because he really doesn't go down the field too much. But pretty much everything, targets, receptions. The guy was just an absolute monster. And he's pretty much the most consistent player in fantasy football. I mean, besides the last game, it's week 17, who cares? But 34, 33, 33, 10, 29, 28, 31, 30, 25, 16, 44, 18, 16, 18, 25. You really were never mad about Michael Thomas, besides that one game where he had, 10 points versus Atlanta, because of course he had 10 points versus Atlanta on Thanksgiving. But Michael Thomas, man, I don't see how you don't play him versus Minnesota. And I know some of you might be thinking, he's got to go against Xavier Rhodes. That's fine. I would love it if Xavier Rhodes is on him the entire game. Xavier Rhodes sucks. He's not very good anymore. So I think he'll be totally fine there. I think he absolutely eats him up. And it does not matter who Michael Thomas is facing. He will smash in any matchup. San Francisco, he crushed versus San Francisco. He had 33 points versus Chicago, a tougher matchup. That was early in the season. He had 25 fantasy points. Does not matter who he's playing, and he is a cheat code at home. The Saints they have the highest implied team total. I think Michael Thomas gets you like 15 targets, 130 yards, 1 to 2 touchdowns. I think he absolutely eats. Yeah, you should probably play Michael Thomas on this slate. So we're going to plug him in. I have no problems with that at all. And just to save time, I don't want to talk about every single player. DeAndre Hopkins, tough matchup versus Buffalo. If I'm playing Michael Thomas, I can't fit in DeAndre Hopkins, so it doesn't make sense for me to tell you guys I like him too much. A.J. Brown, I am a huge A.J. Brown fan. I am a big fan of A.J. Brown. I think he's going to be awesome. Not in this matchup, though, versus Stephon Gilmore. He's going to get the shadow. And we saw A.J. Brown. He's a rookie, so we'll give him some slack. But he did struggle versus Marshawn Lattimore. He only had 1 catch. So I'm going to pass on A.J. Brown, even though I think he's an absolute stud. Tyler Lockett, that's a good matchup for Tyler Lockett. He's set 7,200. He did catch that touchdown last night. Had 7 targets, 6 catches, 1 touchdown, 17.1 fantasy points. He's been a little up or down, I will say, in the second half of this season. Let's see if we can go down. So he was great versus Tampa Bay, where he had 18 targets, 13 catches, 43 points. Then 5-4, I believe the one game he got hurt. Was that versus Minnesota? No, it was versus San Francisco he got hurt. Yeah, versus San Francisco. Came back versus Philly, which is the same matchup. He only had 2 targets, 1 catch. Then he goosed you versus Minnesota. I think he's okay if you can afford him. Problem is, I probably can't afford him considering I want to play Michael Thomas. I'm going to probably have to play some of these mid-range guys, and actually like DK Metcalf better than I like Tyler Lockett. So I will pass on Lockett, but it's a good matchup. You know, wide receivers versus Philly tend to work out pretty well. So I don't hate the idea of using Tyler Lockett if you're playing Russell Wilson. Stephon Diggs, I assume he's going to get the Marshawn Lattimore treatment, so I'm probably going to pass there, although he was the hero a couple years ago versus New Orleans when they beat him in the divisional round. That was absolutely awesome. I know you guys remember that, but that's a classic, all-time classic. But I'm going to pass on Stephon Diggs there. Julian Edelman, I like him. I mean, if I like Tom Brady, I have to like Julian Edelman. They actually struggle versus the wide receiver position. We've seen wide receiver ones crush versus Tennessee all season. Now, he is dealing with a little bit of an injury bug, but I think he's going to be fine. He had 7 targets last week. And overall, besides the last 3 weeks, he's been pretty consistent all season. So if you want to play Tom Brady and you want to pair him up with Julian Edelman, absolutely no problem with that at all. I think they lean on Edelman through the air like they usually do. Wouldn't surprise if you get double-digit targets, but he did not fit this lineup. Adam Thielen, I can't trust the guy right now. Now, it's a good matchup in the slot versus New Orleans. I know Adam Thielen had success versus New Orleans last year, but I just can't trust Adam Thielen right now, so I'm going to pass. But DK Metcalf, I like him quite a bit. He's my favorite mid-range wide receiver this week. He had 12 targets last night versus San Francisco, 6 catches, 81 yards, 1 touchdown. Another guy, I think he's going to be awesome. He had 20 fantasy points, and he's been pretty good this season, and this is a great matchup versus Philly. This is one of the best games, and this is also the late game, so you can get some late-night hammers here if you want to use DK Metcalf. 46-point over-under, 1.5-point spread in Seattle's favor, so they have the higher implied team total here, and I think DK Metcalf is an excellent play. I can't remember what he did versus Philly last time out. He had only 6 targets, 3 catches, 17 yards. So he sucked, but I think he'll be fine here. I'm not going to just use it based off of just one game. Definitely like DK Metcalf. I'm going to be plugging him in. I think he's one of the best mid-range plays at wide receiver this week. John Brown, I like John Brown. If you're playing Josh Allen too, you could hook up on a deep ball. Don't mind him. John Brown's been very consistent this season, as has that's a tough sentence to say. As has Cole Beasley. 5,600. He's more of a check down guy though. John Brown's got a lot more upside. But Greg Ward, I like Greg Ward. 5,200. I think he's a solid option just because I was going to say he's a solid receiver. He's really not that good, but it's just due to a lack of options on Philly. I mean, Carson Wentz had over 4,000 passing yards this year, and he didn't have a 500-yard receiver. That just goes to show how banged up they've been. Obviously, Deshaun Jackson's out. Nelson Aguilar's banged up. Alshon Jeffrey's out. Zach Ertz has been banged up the past 2 weeks. So if Zach Ertz is out again, Greg Ward, man, I think is a good play. He had 7 targets last week, only 10 fantasy points, but he's been solid. I mean, 10, 11, 19, 7. Oh, I hate it. I like this game for fantasy purposes. I want to load up on it because it's the late game. I don't know about you guys, but I just like having late game exposure because when I get a dud early on, especially on a 2-game slate, it's easier on a 1-game slate, on a 1-day slate. But it's on a 2-game slate, you get a dud on Saturday, I'm mad the whole day. I don't know about you guys, but I'm so upset because I could be like, I could have played someone in the late game. So I just personally like to attack these late games. Unfortunately, I believe the Saints the Saints are on the late game as well. So we actually had the 2 best games in my opinion on Sunday. So if you want to load up on the late games and just fade the first 2 games, I totally understand that. These are the 2 better games, so don't mind that strategy at all. But you're probably going to have to get some exposure to the first couple games. But either way, Greg Ward, good play. Seattle secondary is not that great. And again, if Zach Ertz is out, he becomes an even better play. He's been solid. 5,200, not a bad price tag, so we're going to be plugging him in. And after that, wide receiver takes a dip. I mean, it takes a big dip. Will Fuller, he's questionable. Stills is questionable. Jeffrey, Deshaun Jackson obviously aren't playing. Aguilar is questionable. I assume he's not going to play. Can you really trust N'Keal Harry? I can't. Traquan Smith, no thank you. Mohamed Sanu, no thank you. Davis, no, especially versus New England. Sharp, I mean, these guys suck. So really the lowest I'm going to go is Greg Ward. I mean, maybe one of these guys catches a random touchdown. And let's see the status on Kenny Stills officially. So let's see. Kenny Stills, Will Fuller. So he's heading into the right direction. Now, it's way early in the week, so I have no idea. So if he plays, I guess I was going to say something else, but I guess it really wouldn't matter. Let's see what Kenny Stills says. Yeah, because he was inactive for the game just because I think that's just more of a rest thing. Okay, so I wouldn't look into that too much. I would assume they're going to play. I was going to say if maybe one of those guys missed the games, you guys could look at someone like Kiki Cutie or DeAndre Carter, but I really don't think that's going to be an option. So that's the lowest I'd really go is Greg Ward. So now we move on to the tight end position. Zach Ertz, he's questionable. I don't know if he's going to play this game, I guess. I mean, he's dealing with a lot of injuries. I mean, he's a tough guy, but if he didn't play in a really, really important game versus the Giants, he's got to be really banged up. It's not like they were resting him. So let's just go into the assumption he doesn't play. And if he doesn't, I would like to fit in Dallas Goedert here because this is an elite matchup versus Seattle. They are one of the worst teams defensively versus the tight end position. I believe they're giving up the second most points per game. Like they are just, let me just check really quick. Seattle is giving up the second most points per game at the position, only behind Arizona. We know how bad Arizona was versus the pass, allowing 16 points per game. Dallas Goedert played 100% of the snaps last week. 100%, had 10 targets, only caught 4 of them. I think he's going to be better than that most times. And you get what I'm trying to say. Most of the time he should be better than that. And he's a good tight end. I mean, he was a high draft pick for the Philadelphia Eagles. So if Zach Ertz is out, which we're going to assume right now, I mean, Dallas Goedert 5,200. I love the game environment here. I'm going to just plug in Dallas Goedert and move on. So now we have 3,600 left. We'll plug in the defense I like first because I like the Saints here. Just playing at home. Do I love picking on Minnesota? Not totally, but they're dealing with a banged up Dalvin Cook, banged up Adam Thielen. Kirk Cousins isn't the greatest quarterback in the world, so let's just plug in the Saints. They're big home favorites. I think it's a good play. Then we have 4,300 left, and at this point we can fit in Jacob Hollister. You just get more exposure to the late game, which I absolutely love. So we're gonna plug him in, and again, I think Carson Wentz is a solid play, and I think Russell Wilson's a solid play. Neither of them are in my lineup, so let's just get exposure to all their passing options. So, fair enough. I think we can get exposure to them without actually having to play them. So, and Hollister, the matchup versus Philly, it's kind of whatever, but he's been a consistent target for Russell Wilson. He actually almost caught that game-winning touchdown last night, but he was like just this short. But he did have 8 targets, 6 targets, 3 targets, 6 targets. Not a big yardage guy, but I do like his chances of maybe finding the end zone here, so I don't hate playing Jacob Hollister. 4,300, not a bad price tag either. So that's pretty much going to be it for this video, guys. We got, again, don't look too much into this lineup, but we have Tom Brady, he's the cheapest quarterback. Devin Singletary, Carlos Hyde. Those are all 3 of our Saturday games are first, and again, I have a bunch of exposure to the Sunday games because I like getting late game exposure, and they're the best games. But Tom Brady going up against a bad Tennessee pass defense, Singletary and Carlos Hyde going up against bad run defenses, Michael Thomas, he's the lock of the slate. Then we got DK Metcalf in a favorable matchup versus Philly, Greg Ward in a favorable matchup versus Seattle, Dallas Goedert if Zach Ertz is out, it's a fantastic play. Jacob Hollister just because he fit at the end, and Saints defense, they're big favorites at home. That's going to be it for this video, guys. I hope it was helpful. If it was, remember to leave a like. If you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. Really helps me out. Really appreciate it. And yeah, follow me on Twitter if you want. Links in the description below for my Patreon, and see you in the next video.